Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for everything public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local governments.
It was a good learning experience for a lot of us that social media is not real life.
But we have to remember the media are very rarely a target audience. They're simply that conduit.
Our words have impacts on individuals, and it may not be positive. So just being thoughtful and mindful of the words that we speak.
I think what's so interesting about this position too, and this job and this profession, is that every one of us is looking for purpose. And when we find it here, that's it.
To know is that a crisis for one is not necessarily a crisis for another.
Hey everybody, just wanted to get on here real quick and ask everybody if they enjoyed our content, if they've listened to us, if they want to keep us going, to help support the show. And you can do that by going down to the bottom of the show notes of today's episode and clicking the link and giving us a sponsorship or even just a one-time donation. That'll really help us keep this podcast going and keep us giving you new content. Thanks everybody. Enjoy today's episode. Morning. Today on the PIO Podcast, we're very happy to have Greg Matusky, CEO and founder of Gregory FCA Public Relations, based out of New York City. He's also a podcaster of the Disruption in Now podcast. Welcome to the show, Greg.
It's great to be here, Robert. Thanks for inviting me.
Greg, so when I started looking into the whole AI thing, I came across your name, but I'd like to find out a little bit about your background and how you started Gregory FCA Public Relations.
Well, I am a 34-year overnight success story. I started my firm in 1990. I was a former business writer. I wrote for business magazines. And then in 1990, I decided that whereas I liked placing stories, didn't necessarily like writing them. So I went into the PR industry and have grown the firm. And we're now the 36th largest in the country. We're the 6th largest financial services firm, and we have offices in Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and London, and we service clients literally all over the world. So we have 120 professionals. Outstanding. The whole reason I contacted you was to talk about AI, and artificial intelligence scares a lot of people right now. I just saw the father of AI made a comment about having some controls put into place, but it concerns people because, number one, it's new. It's also, we do know that eventually some jobs are going to be eliminated because of it. But AI has its benefits, and your firm truly fully embraced it. So can we talk about why did you embrace it and integrate it into your entire firm? Well, Robert, the first time I saw ChatGPT, this was in December of 2022, and it was ChatGPT 3.0. I smiled. It was one of the most joyous days of my life. And the reason being is that I had done PR for many years. And the one thing I'd always struggled with was helping other people become better communicators so that they could spur human understanding, which is the real goal of all human communications. And I've worked with so many people over the years, and I've helped, and I've led training seminars on writing and content generation. And I always try to be high energy and excited. And everyone loved the presentation. And then 2 weeks later, we'd be back to where we were. And writing, I believe, is something that requires you to create a neural pathway in your mind and to be able to associate, on the one hand, all the data that goes into it. That's the syntax and the grammar and the word choice, with the messaging, with just a high level thinking. And I realized when I saw that here was something that could take care of the data for a lot of people so that they could really focus on the more intelligence part, which was the delivery of the message. And I became enamored with it. I immersed myself in it. My weekends are often spent watching my beloved Philadelphia Phillies with the sound down as I listen to thought leaders on AI. And Jeffrey Hinson, who you mentioned, who is the grandfather of
AI and has said some very negative things, as one of the people that I have listened to extensively over the course. And sure, there are downsides to any new technology, but I believe this is the fourth great wave of technology. It started with the GUI interface in the late 1980s. It evolved into the internet of the late 1990s, and then the smartphone and social media, quick adoption in the aughts. And now we have AI, which is the first time that machines will be able to storytell. Up until now, that's been solely the domain of humans. And it does some amazing things. And I think talking about some of the risks is very important. And I think that is something that wasn't done enough in earlier incarnations of technology. For instance, only now are we talking about the damage that social media does. We accepted it wholeheartedly. Yet with AI, we're already going into the issues of what would happen if we had a generalized AGI, for instance, that was smarter than human beings. What would that do to the human condition? What would that do if it could be so productive that it got rid of all jobs? What will we do as a society? Those questions are being asked right now. And I think that's a safeguard against it being against the risks associated with AI. And the other side of it is that the advantages of AI are, I think, that ultimate goal of communications, which is to spur greater human understanding. And I think that's a goal that we can all get behind and agree is a valuable one and one that has great sanctity.
And I agree with you on that. There are some benefits, and I did see this early on when I saw ChatGPT 3.0 at the beginning. I saw tremendous advantages for writers to come up with new ways of presenting something, or just a different perspective, but to work it out, let the computer work it out for you instead of you having to work it out. So I do see those benefits. What benefits do you see from using AI in the public relations point of view right now?
Well, I think there's three main sources of benefits, Robert. One is the content you're talking about, which to be able to generate high quality content is a mix of machine and human right now. The machine alone will not generate great quality content. It'll generate workman quality content. If you need to send an email to your teammates about a collaborative effort, AI does a pretty good job of that. But if you need to write a thoughtful, human, empathetic piece, AI doesn't do that very well. But it does set you up. It does organize it, it does outline it, and it jumpstarts the process. So certainly on content, it has a value. On creativity and brainstorming, it also has tremendous value. And we often use it to come up with new ways of thinking of things. I often tell the story about early in the process, AI is predictive. That's the way it works. It takes the most likely words that it's just seen. It takes the words it's just seen, and then it predicts the most likely tokens or words that will follow. And I often think that's not really the domain of creativity, right? That's the domain of what's been done. And so early in the process, I had it take this divergent disassociation test. And what that test does is gives human beings 4 minutes to write 10 words, which are rarely seen together in a human language, right? And these are disassociative. So if it's predictive, can it be disassociated? And that's where a lot of creativity comes in. When you take two very disparate thoughts and you put them together and you have something genuine new. And at its earliest phase, OpenAI or ChatGPT scored about 86 on that test. The average human scores about 72. PR people score low 90s, perhaps. So right away, I saw that it had the ability to be creative. So we use that in a lot of ways within the firm to come up with creative and new ideas. Everything from a creative headline to a creative event that we could put on for our clients. And it's remarkable of how well it is. For instance, a couple of weeks ago, I responded to a major RFP. And the RFP was to build investment an opportunity between two continents, the US and another continent, let's just say, so I anonymize it. And I went through and I asked it for ideas. And one of the ideas it came up with, and you may say this is not ground shaking, but it was new. It was something I hadn't thought of, was to create a documentary of how the markets are changing and how this investment could change lives all over this continent, right? And to take that documentary and then premiere it at independent film festivals all across the world. And then to sell it to streaming. I mean, the ideas just went on and on. Right. And that would create huge PR opportunities, right? Then I put into an RFP and responded to using that type of creativity. Now, you say, well, I could have come up with that. It's nothing new, Robert, but was it in my field of perspective when I was responding? No. Did I think it was did I think it was very additive to the RFP? Yes. So I see that more and more. So that's the second thing. And the third thing, Robert, which I'm really excited about, is workflow efficiencies. And as a publicist, you know that there are so many friction points in our industry that we've just come to accept. I mean, that's the way it is, right? The media calls, the client can't get on the phone right away, and the opportunity's lost. And in your world, in crisis communications, it comes out the company was unavailable for comment, right? When you had a comment, it was just the CEO was in a meeting with the general counsel and couldn't get approval. You couldn't get approval fast enough. Well, with AI, there's ways to have many standing statements now that fit any scenario and can be sent quickly for approval and then sent out. So these are the types of friction that for years we accepted that I don't think other industries would have accepted because they're more technologically enabled in public relations. So I think on the workflow side, we haven't even begun to tap the opportunities to improve the relationship of client and agency and client and the media.
Right. And this is one of the things I think you talk about workflow. I saw this process that you have with the WriteRelease program that you created, where it's for writing press releases. Why create it and why release it for free to everyone?
Let's take a quick break.
When you think about propaganda, you probably think about Kim Jong-un and his funny little haircut. And you'd be exactly right. The podcast, This is Propaganda, doesn't want you to believe that. They want you to question the ads you see, the news you read, the brands you love. What they don't want you to question is that they are advertisers themselves, peddling the same tricks they claim you fall for to make a living. If you need something to boycott, look no further than this show. Don't listen to This is Propaganda.
Well, that's an interesting story. I mean, when we were getting into this, we basically wanted to show the world that we really understood what was going on. And we set up a templated AI skin over OpenAI for press releases, over ChatGPT. And it's amazing you would bring this up this morning because since then, I think a lot of us within Gregory FCA have become a lot more, how should I say, freelancers, where they don't go through a set process, that they just start talking to the machine in natural language and they get what they want out of it. But this morning, I was in a training session with 6 of our new recruits, junior associates, and they don't have the luxury of understanding this natural language process where you can talk to a machine like a human being on the very points you want to get out of it, and it gives it to you. So I brought up WriteRelease, which is a free online, WriteRelease.com, which we released in March of 2023 to great reception. And I said, this is templated. So let's go through our case study that you're working on and put facts in and see what it comes up with. And so we put it in and their jaws hit the ground. They could not believe it came up with such a wonderful analysis of the launch of this new product, which they're working on as part of their 2-week training course here at Gregory FCA. So we did that to show our chops, basically, that we know what we're talking about. We did that because we want to have a coalition of the willing, Robert. I really believe that the only way we're going to avoid the risks and gain all the benefits is if like-minded people come together and explore and learn how to use these tools. If we don't do that, I think the risk is much greater. And WriteRelease was certainly within that collaborative, community-based approach that here's what we learned, feel free to use it.
And I could see public sector PIOs, they're always struggling to write a press release that's going to be engaging for the media. We know that that's the hardest thing to get in front of somebody. We're competing for, in some cases, some markets, hundreds of press releases that come out a day. How do you get them to grab yours? And if your WriteRelease.com program can help them get that press release into the right hands and the right eyes, why not?
That's right. So, the world, there is no textbook on artificial intelligence. We can only learn from one another. And I often say everything I know about AI, I learned from Twitter, X. And that means that I scroll on it all the time, my thought leaders. And if there's something new and something that was just introduced, I stop, I listen, I try to emulate it. If I can't, I direct message them. They're often polite enough and gracious enough to answer me. And I've learned a great deal through that process on how it works and why it's so transformative.
Okay, so let's talk about what you're doing internally. You have an internal AI called Gladwrite that was developed and it's now used extensively in your firm. What does it do?
Well, Gladwrite was a predecessor, and I say this all the time, and I've never been corrected on this, so I think I'm accurate, is that I believe Gregory FCA was the first public relations agency in the world to have its own generative AI platform. And we developed that in the beginning of 2022. This was well before the chatbot from ChatGPT was introduced. And we initially released it internally at our annual meeting in December of 2022. And it was full of hallucinations and problems. However, you could see, it's kind of like, what good is a newborn baby, right? Babies have problems. Babies cause a lot of misery, but they're also full of all kinds of potential. I know this, my 18-month-old is staying with us temporarily, and he didn't sleep last night. So there's all kinds of problems with babies, right? But the good news is they grow into something fantastic. So we embedded that within the company. We socialized everyone. We called it Gladwrite as a tip of the hat to Malcolm Gladwell, one of the best nonfiction writers I've ever read. And then when ChatGPT came along, we had all the frameworks for prompting already done because of Gladwrite. And we just moved that over to ChatGPT, what was 3.0, 3.5, now it's 4.0, and we used ChatGPT 4.0 teams now that displaced Gladwrite, but was an important step in the evolution of the technology that we had a jump start with.
So you were ahead of the game. You were using generative AI before ChatGPT really kind of fell into everybody's lap when they released 3.0. Okay.
Yeah. And that was a situation that came about. My son is an engineer out of Carnegie Mellon. In 2021, he challenged me. He said he thought he could write something using AI he would create something that would emulate our writing process. So we started from there. And that was really the beginning of it all, where we created a whole library of tagged written content within the firm that we could access. And then that emerged and became Gladwrite, which now gave us the jump start on a lot of different platforms we use. Claude we're evaluating Gemini right now. We're big believers in ChatGPT 4.0. So.
And now, a word from our sponsor. In today's climate, you need to be able to communicate, whether you're communicating to those you serve, your peers, or your constituents. Whether you're looking for professional development or to work with a professional, John Gladwell Public Relations has you covered. From crisis communications to website development, visit our website at jgpr.net or call us directly at 617-993-0003 to get started today. We'll help you tell your story strategically. Now let's return back to our episode.
Public sector agencies, you alluded to this about getting a hold of the CEO in a crisis. public sector agencies are a lot different because, very much that executive, the chief, the mayor, they want to be involved in the crafting sometime of the message. Where do you see AI being used in the public affairs end of it, public information sector of the whole process?
Well, certainly in the planning process, I think it plays a big role. And I have done entire crisis communications plans using AI, where I've come up with 30 different scenarios for an organization with statements for each scenario using AI. Down to, for instance, for one client, there was a difference in the statement for those residents that live close to the plant as opposed to those who were in the broader township of the plant, right? So those that have neighboring adjacent property had different concerns, which we identified, and we created specific statements for that. Now, every situation is different, and there's certainly going to be a need to be a part of the process. However, if you can create that plan, if you have the committee in place, if you have the scenario thought out, it incredibly shortens the response time, which is often just as important as what the response is. I mean, when the media wants answers and there's no one to ask and there's no response coming, that puts it in a bad light right out of the box. So the process can be in the pre-formatting of it and the planning of it, which allows any organization at this point to have a plan at their disposal.
It's interesting you bring this up. So in the process, when you're writing the crisis communications plan, everybody thinks of the what ifs and so on, but they don't always think about the community in the broader sense, slightly beyond where the crisis occurred. So you're saying AI came up with that and said, hey, we need to address the outer community, the community that's farther away from the crisis as well. Because like you said, they have broader concerns. And that may not have been brought up by the humans in the room when they were writing the crisis plan.
That's right. And in this case, we explained what the potential was, right? And it identified that there could be rings of different pain points from this manufacturing plant. And those things are going to be dramatically different. I mean, if it's an issue of well water, right, that could be within 50 meters. However, if it's air quality, it could be within 100 miles. So how do you deal with this to diminish or to put at rest those people who are more at a distance who have it does not really affect, but if you don't respond to it, could lead to an issue, and then specifically answer those questions of people who are at real risk that are adjacent to the plant.
Let's take a quick break.
Are you eager to take your brand or business to the next level, but just need that extra push? I'm Brandon C. Adams, host of the Brandon C. Adams Audio Experience. As an investor, author, speaker, advisor, and two-time Emmy Award-winning producer, I created this podcast to provide a behind-the-scenes look into the life of a successful entrepreneur while sharing the steps it took to get there. Let me provide you with the energy to take massive action and shift your mindset so you can start achieving your goals effectively. If you're ready to take action today, subscribe to the Brandon C. Adams Audio Experience. Go out there, create something great, and become unforgettable, because life is too short not to. I'm Brandon C. Adams. Here's to your success.
So where else do you see AI? Where else could it be integrated into the public sector end of public relations?
Certainly with media training, it could be a very big tool. And we do this here at Gregory FCA. We do a lot of media training. And part of that, if it's crisis, would be an antagonistic interview. To take that interview, record that interview, have Gemini or have Otter AI or any of the tools, ChatGPT, transcribe it, right? Match that with the talking points of what you want to stay with. So you have the interview after training. You train your client. You interview them in an antagonistic manner, like the media would do. You then transcribe it. You then have the talking points of where you wanted to address. And then you ask GPT to review the interview against the talking points. Where did we fall short? Where did we score big? How could we have done it better? And it will go through and timestamp for you each one of those. All right. So you can look at a document then and say, you said, Mayor, XYZ. The talking point was LMNOP. Here's why you want to go back to XYZ. And here's how you could have done it better. Right. So then at the end, we'll say, now create an article based on the pre-training, which was the first version where the talking points didn't align, and then create a Wall Street Journal-like article based on the improvements that you suggested. And from that, the public official can see, wow, if I would have stuck to the talking points, I could have got them embedded in the article, which at least would have gotten our message out there. And that has proven to be a very powerful training mechanism that can be done in literally 2 hours, which could have taken up to 15 hours of work to go through the transcript, identify the issues, put them out, and explain why you'd want to stick to the talking points. So that's a huge opportunity that is available to anybody in the sector.
So on another avenue, with the whole ChatGPT 4.0 right now, it's really come a long way compared to 3. And now they're talking about 4.5 and a little beyond that. Where do you see it, the impact where it comes to video? Because I think that's where they said 4.5 was going to go.
Well, that opens a whole nother discussion because it's off of generative AI. And there's a lot of talk about what video will do. Right now, we see the deep fakes. It does that very well. Those are short videos. They'll put Nancy Pelosi's head on. I saw one that was Nancy Pelosi's head on Fred Sanford from Sanford and Sons, right? I mean, just a deep fake. And that's an issue. And we can go into that on the political basis. That's worth about 5 hours of conversations. But as far as video production, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. Some technologists think that what we're seeing in things like Sora, which was introduced by ChatGPT and others, is kind of a parlor trick because they can only generate content for 30 seconds or 60 seconds because the visual world takes more turns than language, right? Language is much more predictable. So with Sora, when it was released, there's a video of a drone flying over a California gold rush town, and it's really compelling. And you think, wow, that'll change everything. Well, then you stop and think, but where does it go from here? Does it zoom into the tavern, the saloon? Does it go off to the mine and goes down the mine? Where does the visual storytelling? There's 1,000 different options there, and some of the thought leaders think we're going to need a whole new AI to have a consistency of storytelling that would be something akin to a movie within that. Then there are others that say, oh, no, we're going to create this self-correcting loop where it's going to go in one direction, and then we're going to say, no, we want it to go in the other direction. And it will be able to create from that feature-length movies, right? If you really look at a lot of the video that's being produced right now using these platforms, they almost look like movie trailers because there's a quick shot of somebody walking into a sunset. And then the next one is somebody riding a horse across the Great Plains. And it feels like a trailer. That's because you can't connect the story necessarily in where video is today. So I don't know if text to video will be the ultimate answer in all that. But I do think what we saw with the writer's strike is that Hollywood understands it better than I do and thinks it's going to be convulsive and immediately put anchors in place so that they could still see revenue from it. I do think it'll enable what I call a super creator. This would be a young person in a dorm room somewhere who would create the next blockbuster movie using these different applications, Sora for video, Suno for music and sound effects. And they'll make characters that are beloved and followed, and they will have a blockbuster that they produce for the cost of a college tuition when they should have been going to class. So
yeah,
we'll look forward to that.
So we talked about, in the very beginning, we talked about people being nervous and scared about maybe potentially taking away their job. But as of right now, and for what I've been seeing, you're not going to be taking the human out of the process of using AI for quite a while, simply because there's just so many different avenues it can go, right?
Well, I agree with you. I mean, all this work, it's kind of silly, right? They say, it hallucinates and makes mistakes. You better check your work. I don't know why we have to say this in 2024, but we've always had to check our work. I mean, it's never been that we could just put out a news release and the governor or the mayor or the director of safety didn't review it and check the work. So, I don't see that going away, that they'll always need a human there. Right now, to get it to the form you want to get it to, the massaging requires human intervention. I think the empathy and the human spirit that needs to be put in it, I write a lot of byline columns on it, and it never starts with a personal story because it can't. It never starts with I was talking to Robert today on a podcast, and he made a really interesting point that I'd like to share with you. It never starts like that, right? It just starts with the very Wikipedia-like approach to things. But a human can add that. He or she could add that personal story, anecdote up front that would gain interest in readership and empathy with the reader. So, no, I don't think the humans are going away. I think there's going to be huge demand for what we do, Robert. I think this is going to create more demand. Every technological advance ever in the history of our modern society has created more jobs, not less. Every time there's been a bigger locomotive introduced in the Industrial Revolution, it's created more jobs, not less. I don't think there's going to be a time where in my future where there'll be autonomous enterprises. I just don't think that's happening in that, but there will be eventually perhaps autonomous enterprises. And then we're already looking at that. We're already looking at where the jobs will be and what we'll have to do as far as training, retraining, or maybe not. I mean, maybe this is a way to generate wealth, which will pay for jobs that have never been paid for before, like being a great parent. I mean, if machines are generating revenue, maybe the revenue would be enough that we could pay parents or pay teachers or what they're worth, or firefighters what they're worth, or EMTs what they're worth, or pediatricians what they're worth. And instead of, an EMT in a small town making $45,000 a year, maybe we could afford to pay him $100,000 and have the very best safety network on the planet. So it opens all kinds of doors and opportunities. It's only limited by our own imagination.
All right, I'm gonna grab your imagination then. Where do you see AI going in the public sector in the next 5 years?
Well, I think, government is always the slowest to adapt, and education. But what you have to realize is there's going to be the next generation. And the next generation is going to come to their jobs already knowing these tools, right? So the government better prepare for that, like my firm is doing, because I don't want young kids walking in the door who don't use any guardrails. They have got to put up the guardrails. Like, how do you protect it? How do you get rid of bias? How do you make sure it's not hallucinating? How do you assure it's not plagiarize something, that a government agency isn't plagiarizing somebody who holds a copyright? All that needs to be done now, because the next wave of young people, they're going to be using ChatGPT to research, to write, to think, to augment their own educational process. And they're going to come to our offices in the public sector, and they're going to know these tools. And if the guardrails aren't there, it opens it up to tremendous risk, right? But there is no going back, right? And the governments need to learn this could be a tool for speaking to many, many audiences at once instead of a singular audience. So maybe there's messages that have to go throughout to disadvantaged communities if there's a health hazard that's dramatically different than the affluent neighborhoods in your town, right? Maybe you can't say to disadvantaged audiences that just go to your pediatrician when they have no health care plan, when they have no relationship with their physicians, when they've been going to emergency rooms instead of to primary care physicians, right? So this would show you, AI could show you where you're making poor assumptions that are clogging your communications and thwarting human understanding instead of advancing it. So all that's on the horizon, I think.
Excellent. Is there a question that I should have asked regarding artificial intelligence as it pertains to public information officers? And if so, how would you have answered it?
Is what we do in a lot of ways is confidential, right? We can't let it be out in the public as we go through this process of communicating with the public because things change, we edit, right? Is there a risk that using AI could be intercepted by others and misunderstood in the sausage making process, right? A crisis occurs, it changes hourly. What happened an hour ago? This could be seen in the COVID pandemic, right? What we thought we knew in the beginning changed. Now everybody goes back and says they lied to us. Well, not necessarily. The information was being changed throughout the process. And if that gets out, that could be catastrophic of how you have to change, right? So I would ask, is there a chance that somebody could intercept this and it could be hacked and used against you? And these platforms now have solved that. They've put lockdowns on their systems. And those lockdowns are only as good as, for instance, Microsoft's cloud, Google's cloud. If you believe that your information is safe there, then I think you have to believe that your information is safe in the AI platforms too. And doesn't mean it can't be hacked. It just means that there is a degree of safety there that prevents it from becoming in the public domain.
Okay, Greg, can we switch to some rapid fire questions?
I'm sorry?
Can we switch to some rapid fire questions?
Go ahead.
Texting or talking?
I'm sorry?
Texting or talking?
Oh, people know they call me or go find me.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Adult drink of choice?
I don't drink much. Unsweet iced tea.
What would be your superpower if you could have one?
Oh, invisibility.
Ask permission or beg for forgiveness?
Oh, beg for forgiveness.
Place you'd most want to travel to?
Oh, the Amalfi Coast, Italy.
Beautiful, isn't it?
Yep.
Who would you choose if you could have coffee with any historical figure, living or dead?
George Patton.
Oh, that would be an interesting interview.
Yeah.
What key points would you like our listeners to take away from today's interview?
That we really need to have a coalition of the willing. And even if once you learn about AI, if you reject it, you'll be a part of the community. You'll know why you rejected it and you'll understand it. So instead of resisting it, I would ask them to start playing with it and start seeing what it can do in their world and their careers and help advance the government's cause with better communications.
I agree with that. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Greg?
No, it's been a fun conversation. I appreciate it.
Greg, how could people best reach out to you if they want to connect or learn more about your firm or what you're doing with AI?
GregoryFCA.com. We're all over social media and all over our website. So just look for us.
I will add all that into the show notes. Gregory, thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you. Take care, Robert.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
That's all for this week. We hope you enjoyed this episode.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast to get notified on the latest episode. If you are listening on a platform that allows you to leave a review, please give us a review. Any review is appreciated. To support our efforts with the PIO podcast, you can click on the support button in the show notes, and any donation is appreciated. Thank you.